Welcome to Beginning a New World Order, 1980 to 2008. This is Melinda Klein. With the failure to secure a democratic peace for the South Vietnamese, compounded with the oil dispute of the 1970s, the vision of the United States as a great and powerful nation was somewhat blurry. Could the United States continue as a prosperous and automobile-loving culture? After World War II, this effect of owning and driving an automobile seemed to identify its citizens as mobile and hard-working, while commuting allowed for suburban growth across the nation. When in 1981 Ronald Reagan, a committed conservative in his philosophical ideals, became president, he refused to accept the notion that the United States had hit its limits as a world power and, as a result, bowed under the weight. Reagan rejected the liberal vision of America and accused the government as being part of the problem as the decade opened with record unemployment and high interest rates. An immensely popular president, Reagan restored America's image as a powerful world power. The country's dependency on foreign oil and escalating tensions with the Soviet Union and the Middle East required a new approach to foreign affairs. The 9/11 attacks reshaped the ongoing debate about America's role in the world and the best way to protect American citizens. When the Cold War ended by 1991, Americans believed that their nation would take the lead in creating a new world order, even as they disputed how best to respond and how best to spread democracy across the world. After 9/11, President George W. Bush moved to resolve to restore the image of America as a powerful and triumphant nation. He led the country in two wars that would target terrorism, first in Afghanistan and the second in Iraq. In 2008, Americans provided a different sort of history-making moment by electing the first African-American president of the United States. By then, the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s posed an additional challenge for the nation. The world was profoundly changed between 1975 and 1991. The end of the Cold War dominated international relations to the end of the 1980s. Every conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union threatened to provoke a confrontation between nuclear-armed superpowers. The election of 1988 brought to office George H.W. Bush. The Bush administration did not promote any new initiatives to address gender, racial, or ethnic inequalities. During the Democratic Bill Clinton years, elected in 1992 and 1996, the office of the president took a more aggressive attitude towards change and reform, such as proposing a comprehensive health care plan. President Clinton helped to accelerate the trend towards global trade with the 1992 North American Trade Agreement, a treaty that lifted trade barriers between the USA, Mexico, and Canada. Clinton used his superior political skills not only to weaken the power of the Republican agenda, but also to survive his scandals and impeachment, such as surrounding the Monica Lewinsky scandal of 1994, found on slide 5. The election of 2000 brought in a Republican, George W. Bush, the son of the father who had been president before Clinton, and this son was a Texas governor advocating to create an ownership society through tax cuts supporting more control over personal wealth, retirement accounts, health care, and property. The Bush Doctrine established the unilateral right to attack nations that harbored terrorists, to launch preemptive strikes to prevent future attack on the United States, and to replace autocratic governments with elected ones. Most of this philosophical concept was old, but the right to declare war based on terrorism was new. As in the 19th century, with the advent of the steam engine marking the first industrial revolution in America, and electricity hallmarking the second industrial revolution in America, so too the coming of the computer and access to the World Wide Web changed our daily lives. Computers and the internet quickly reshaped how Americans worked and played by the year 2000. The internet reshaped education of their children and the kind of materials available to them. Schools quickly bought into this new technology and brought them into classrooms, including internet connections, allowing teachers and students information at their fingertips. In less than a generation, the composition of the American family had drastically changed. By 1998, 47% of American families lived in non-married households, both with and without children, compared to 26% in 1972. While Clinton's sexual dalliance became national news, what was really the foundation of this problem? Republicans argued that Clinton's failure to tell the truth under oath warranted impeachment. President Bush, like Republicans past and present, desired to cut government spending and reduce the size of the government. With his compassionate conservatism, Bush and his administration stretched an approach to governing that emphasized using private industries, charities, and religious organizations rather than the government to provide community social services. The fall of communism in Europe reinforced American faith in the superiority of capitalism over communism. But would the fall of communism usher in a better world? Many Americans believe so. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union was considered tough, ironclad, one might say, thus unchangeable. The Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev embraced reform like no leader before him to save the Soviet Union, not to destroy it. Patriot Act 2001 to address the issue of national security. Clearly, as the nation's agencies had failed to secure our borders with 9/11, the Patriot Act was presented by President Bush and endorsed by Congress. The massive wave of immigration that began after Congress eliminated national quotas in 1965 initiated another important social transformation in the United States. The 1991 Los Angeles riots brought simmering racial and ethnic tensions to the attention of Americans across the nation. Most blacks sided with Rodney King, feeling that he was unfairly treated, while the jury saw the police as doing their jobs. The not guilty verdict set off 4 days of rioting in Los Angeles, which was reminiscent of the 1965 LA riots.